I just remembered the stage, and I think I'm about to take back every nice thing I've said about Sonic 4, which hasn't been a lot, mind you, but still. Again, I almost feel like in my case, playing Sonic 4 like just a couple of years ago for the first time really has helped my opinion of it, because I don't think of it as like the next major 2D game and the only 2D game we'll get for a very long time in the franchise. I think of it as like, well, at least we got Mania after, so it was sort of worth it in the end. But we basically have a crushing wall after us that will insta-kill us, so we have to move very quickly through here. I remember, like, this level being extraordinarily cheap, so we'll have to see how this goes. I'm not gonna say anything, because I am prone to jinxing. So I'm going to talk about how much this level is probably going to get me killed at least once, and not talk whatsoever about how we haven't died yet in this stage. So far so good. I'd really love a checkpoint though, because it feels like it's been a bit. There we go. So I feel a little less stressed now. You know, going a whole minute with a crushing wall behind you and no checkpoint is not a good feeling. Hey, remember what I said about me being able to jinx myself very easily? Yeah, so, I don't like this, actually. Basically, that little, vent just pushes you away from the top gear, so you're not really able to react fast enough to land on the top gear, meaning you basically fall on the bottom path, which has a bottomless pit below the next gear. So, again, very cheap level design. Again, that's just kind of a Dimps thing, to just put a lot of bottomless pits without a lot of second chances, just to slow you down. So again, part of me wonders if actually growing up with the Sonic Rush games, more so actually than a lot of the classic 2D games, is part of the reason why I'm also more forgiving towards this than a lot of fans, just because I'm so used to this. I'm kind of just not as bothered by it, because I really didn't play the classic Sonic games nearly as much. Like, I played Sonic 2 a bunch, but I didn't really ever get close to beating it, to be honest. The only one I ever beat was 3, because I had saving. But beyond that, I basically didn't play 1 very much at all, and played a lot more of, like, yeah, Rush, from what I recall. The wall is definitely catching up to us, which is not a great feeling. They also give you a lot of lives, which is definitely an interesting choice that definitely indicates that they knew this level would be not great, so let's just give them lives constantly to make up for the very unfortunate level design. That's kind of how a lot of this game feels, is like, yeah, they're trying to kind of buffer the difficulty just by showering you with extra lives, which to me is kind of a cheap way to get around difficulty. I am trying to remember if I'm thinking of the right boss with this enemy, or if I'm thinking of a different boss from Part 2. This is basically like the thing in Sonic 2 for Metropolis, oddly enough, where you have the little capsules that you have to break to actually get close enough to Eggman. Again, the only difference this time is we actually have a homing attack, so in some ways this might be a little bit more straightforward. I feel like those didn't explode in Sonic 2 from what I recall. This is not good. We somehow survived. Again, remember what I said about jinxing? So it turns out the best way to fight this is to not stand in the corner. By the way, we actually can't deal damage until he actually starts the fight like so, which I don't really like, to be honest. I like how in the classic games you could actually deal damage while he's dropping into the arena. It's cheap, obviously, and it makes certain fights an absolute joke, but I actually do like how you can just kind of rush through fights like this. We're back in the corner, which isn't great. If rings bounce too far off screen, we're basically out of luck. Most of the capsules are almost gone, so hopefully once we're done with that, we'll be in a little bit of a better position for the rest of the fight. Those rings went flying, that's not good. Okay, we're in trouble again. I am amazed that didn't count. I thought that would have counted. There's the last capsule. I'm starting to realize that this game actually suffers from Sonic 2 syndrome, where the first part of the game is like, you know what, this isn't that bad. Like, you have a couple of cheap shots from time to time, but it's not too bad. But then you get to the end of it, and it's just kind of cheap, and it gets really cheap at the end. I'm really curious to see how Episode 2 feels after this, because I remember having opinions on Episode 2 when I first played it a few years ago. But I remember liking it more than Sonic for Episode 1 in some ways. But I'm very curious to see if that opinion holds up. Again, this is basically just a Metropolis boss, but worse, because I feel like for some reason they're a lot harder to avoid. Let's run to the opposite end and hopefully avoid this. I am not happy about that. So we're almost done with this phase of the fight, I hope. There we go. It actually wasn't that bad, but I just kept getting pinned in the corner, basically. And there he goes. But that finishes up the final standard act of Sonic 4, Episode 1. Never mind, we actually have a chase. I forgot about this, actually. So now we have to deal with the bouncing capsules and also catch up to them. This is very dimps. Sonic Advance 2 had a lot of running boss fights from what I recall. I've actually never played the game in full, but I remember it from like the demo video on the Mega Collection actually, and yeah, there was a lot of running fights from what I've seen. I'd love to play those games someday, it's just, I don't think they've ever gotten a re-release. They're kind of in legal limbo, specifically in North America, because they were actually published by THQ. This isn't good. I'll be honest, I have actually lost track of how many times I've attempted this fight. And unfortunately, despite this being a multi-phase boss fight, we actually do have to defeat the first form as well, which is definitely one of my biggest pet peeves in Sonic games period, is when you have to do a multi-phase fight in one go. Especially when you have cheap shots, and Sonic games often do. I almost feel like this game doesn't have the standard 8-hit boss fights. I almost feel like it's more than 8 hits for a lot of these fights. Though to be fair, I'm not exactly keeping track. I'm kind of trying to stay alive more than anything, and that was a dumb choice on my part that somehow paid off. So next up is Phase 2, and hopefully we'll be able to get through it without too much trouble. I don't remember this very much, so if he has any tricks up his sleeve, I guess we'll find out. So this should be interesting. So yeah, again, Sonic Advance 2 has a lot of running fights, which is very fun. Again, I'd imagine at least, because again, I've actually never played that game myself. But again, the games were published in North America by THQ, which shut down. So with THQ Nordic existing, that kind of creates the problem of like, who actually owns Sonic Advance anymore? Is it Sega? Like, did the rights revert when THQ went under the first time? Or is it still under THQ Nordic? Well, that was much faster that time, and we are actually done with the penultimate stage of Sonic 4 Episode 1. Our final stage is the Egg Station, And we start out with what is essentially a boss rush. Again, I really wish you could deal damage to him before he spawns in. Again, that's actually a complaint I have with Sonic Origins, which the mobile versions got rid of the ability to actually attack Eggman at the start of the fight, which again, I don't really like. I always think of like the Genesis or the GBA version where you can basically combo Eggman before the fight even starts because of the slowdown and the weird physics of that version. Obviously, the phases have slightly less health because we are in a gauntlet and have to deal with all of them. This also is interesting to me because one of the mobile games, I think it's Sonic 2, actually does have a boss rush that is kind of structured like this, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't actually played those versions myself, but I have seen footage of the boss rush, which I'm pretty sure is actually different than the boss rush in Origins, because that's like, you immediately go to the next boss in Origins, but in Sonic 2's, from what I recall seeing at least, you basically do have little sections that connect each boss fight to each other, so it's actually kind of like this. Again, it's kind of weird how, for as uninspired as this game can feel, it actually did have a fair amount of influence on the franchise going forward, and there were okay ideas in here that were worth salvaging, but some other things that were not worth salvaging, and that's why it's such a, to me, such a fascinating experience. So now we have to deal with the pillar garbage again. Let's hope we have better luck this time. My best advice would actually be to watch Eggman, because he kind of indicates where to go. Like, him moving to the right there indicated that the pillars are gonna leave that space empty. So like, he's moving over here, which means we should definitely get in position to deal with him accordingly. We have one of these again. At least we have a checkpoint before each refight. By the way, there is actually like an achievement on... oh, that was close. There's actually an achievement on all versions except WiiWare, obviously, for doing the egg station without actually losing any rings. Like, not getting hit one time. I've never done this achievement, and it's the main reason why I've never 100%ed this game beyond just, like, again, finding the emerald's really annoying, to be honest. That's bad. We somehow survived that. I don't know how, but that takes care of that refight. So next up is the bubble fight, or the capsule fight. So I guess, I'm trying to remember which phase it is. Like, is it both phases, or is it just the running phase? I want to say it's just the running phase, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually both. I love how there are rings, but they're actually not along the path, so you often just speed right past them. It is the running part, which I don't know if I prefer this or not, to be honest, with how much trouble we had with both versions of this fight, to be fair. I also wish the actual capsules he was throwing had a visual indication of which type of Eggman it would be. Like, in the other fight, oh, that's new. In the other fight, it feels like all the capsules a lot of the capsules ended up kind of looking the same, so it was like that. It's hard to tell if it's going to be a fast one or a large one, so it ends up feeling kind of like reactionary, more so. There we go, that should be it, and we should be at the final phase of the Egg Station. That was very close, and I'm glad we were able to get through that without too much trouble. But now, here's where the fun begins, and by fun, I mean, I'm slightly terrified by what's coming up next. So we'll have to see how this goes. I hope we can get through this first try, but I'm not counting on it. And of course, we have another Death Egg robot. I don't like this fight. I think, actually, this fight is worse than the Sonic 2 one, to me. For a couple reasons that we'll see in a bit. The attack patterns are completely different, though he has some of his old tricks, like launching all the arms like that. But there are a couple moves, in particular, that are just really obnoxious to deal with, and having not played this fight in a long time, I'm expecting this to at least take a few attempts just to kind of relearn the fight. I also remember there's an instant kill move at the very end of the fight, and it got me because I wasn't expecting it, and wasn't prepared to actually dodge it. So, I'm ready this time, because I'll never forget that. Yeah, parts of this fight can be really annoying, so again, fingers crossed that this doesn't go too badly. So far it doesn't seem that bad, but once it enters like a pinch phase, it gets really rough. I don't know if I've actually really mentioned that at all, but a lot of the bosses do have essentially like pinch phases, like with the slamming the wrecking ball down, for example. But yeah, it's very interesting actually. I think the music also changes. Though I haven't really been paying attention. I've kind of tuned out the music, if I'm being honest. It's just not that great. And again, I almost feel like going for something more melodic that didn't necessarily try to sound like a Genesis song would have been better than trying and kind of over-exaggerating the Genesis synth too much, in my opinion. Again, the same problem happened with Sonic Origins because of the new Supersonic music being new, and again, there were a lot of criticisms of how much it sounded like a Sonic 4 song because of just the particular Genesis sound font that was actually used for that. It's starting to spark, which is not great. That means we're entering the pinch phase, and we are in trouble, if I'm being honest. It'll start to perform a bunch of different attacks like the stomp that you have to roll under like so, and he'll also come back the other way. You have to carefully time this basically. Actually, it only goes to the middle. That's interesting. So at this point, he'll launch the arms, and I'm pretty sure they'll fall and get stuck in the ground, and we have to homing attack them to, I did not mean to spin dash there. We have to homing attack them to send them back at Eggman, like so. That was an off-screen hit, so I hope it counted, and then we can attack it like so, while it's staggered. I was not ready for the stomp, okay, that was a little bit close. Yeah, you have to be really on your toes for this fight, to be honest, and I definitely wasn't expecting the speed of him actually going into his next attack round. Once again, dodging the arms. Oh, he's stomping again. So once again, my advice would be stay in the corner. Again, his feet are both up long enough that you are able to spin dash past them without too much trouble, thankfully. But again, in a way, I actually do like this fight. It does feel like a logical extension of the Sonic 2 fight, but with like new gimmicks. But again, just there's a couple things about it that do end up feeling a little cheap, and that's why I'm kind of torn on this fight a little bit, just because of certain things. So once again, we have to quickly run over and deal as much damage as we can. Well, it's staggered, and rinse and repeat. I actually don't know if Sonic 4 has a timer, because like we're at 7 minutes, and like we still have a ways to go in the fight if I'm not mistaken, so I'm like, I really hope the 10-minute timer isn't a thing anymore, because we are getting dangerously close to that. So I hope we're almost through with this fight, but I actually don't remember for sure how many hits this phase actually takes. Guess we'll find out. There we go again. Again, I wasn't ready. Now he's firing projectiles at us, which is not great, while also trying to charge a spin dash and dodging a bunch of stomping attacks. So yeah, in general, this fight is kind of nifty, but also extraordinarily rude at times. Please go into the arm phase right away. No, he's not. So once again, dodging, and there we go. I almost feel like both Death Eggs have the problem of just having too much waiting. Like, both Death Egg robots, I mean. Like, Sonic 2's also has the problem, it's just kind of having to sit around for a long time. It almost feels worse in this game because, like, right now he's electrified. It's not even the case of attacking safely like in Sonic 2. Like, you could attack him constantly in 2, it's just a matter of is it safe to do so. While in this, it's like, you actively are having to deal with, okay. I'm not sure what happened there. He performed the laser attack, but also the arm didn't hit for some reason. There we go, that should be good. Again, I'm really hoping we're getting close to the end of this fight, just because, again, we must be getting very close to the time limit here, if there is one. Again, I actually don't remember if that's something they kept for Sonic 4, if they got rid of that. For a stage this long, I'd hope they'd get rid of the time limit, but you never know. With a game like this, yeah, we're at 9 minutes, so again, it's slightly nerve-wracking. Not remembering. Oh, he's going backwards this time. That was really close. I should not have survived that, if I'm being honest. I feel like that should have crushed me. I'm glad it didn't, mind you, but I don't understand why it didn't actually work. I'll grab the ring on the way back, hopefully. Never mind. If this isn't the last cycle, we might be in trouble, unfortunately, because this is a very long fight, so... okay, so now this is actually the end. He's gonna attack. And with that, we finished episode 1. Overall, other than having a lot of trouble with certain bosses, I do feel like Sonic 4 is a little bit overhated. Again, a lot of the level design is still very cheap. By the way, that last hit, basically, if you don't land a hit fast enough, the floor collapses. So that got me on my first playthrough of the game. I would never forget that. And man, that stage goes right up to the wire in terms of the time limit, which I'm also not a fan of, if I'm being honest. But overall, yeah, I did feel like that was not... I do feel like the game is overhated, but again, because of when it released, I do feel like that did impact it a lot more, because of just the expectations being so high for it, and just not having a 2D Sonic game in such a long time, and of a classic style with, you know, we had the Rush games, but those are essentially like the progenitor of the Boost games, so something trying to be more traditional, and this game kind of failed in that regard because of like the physics being off, and like the level design being so unoriginal. And then Generations came out the following year, and classic Sonic still doesn't feel 100% accurate, but is like so much better to the point of this game just feeling even more off than it would otherwise. But we are actually only halfway through this game. We still have all of episode 2 to go through, so our journey with this game is not quite over yet. So again, I haven't played 2 since then either. So I'm also very curious to see how I feel about that game. Again, I remember having better things to say about 2 at the time, but we'll have to see if that holds up. At the time, I'm pretty sure it actually reviewed worse, and I almost feel like it coming out after Generations is why it reviewed worse, because we actually had a good example of a 2D Sonic game between this part and the second part. So it kind of changed how people actually perceived Episode 2, even though I think in general Episode 2 is better liked on the whole. It's not like, you know, anywhere close to the classic games, but I do feel like in general the fan base is a little bit kinder to Episode 2. But again, not a lot. Both games are fairly disliked among certain circles of the fandom. But in general, that was fun to revisit this episode. Again, it's not something I go out of my way to play, especially in comparison to the classic games. So yeah, it is a very interesting experience. I can't exactly recommend it, because it is a very mid-level Sonic game. Like, it's not very exceptional, even as someone who did like it. But we'll see if that changes with Part 2. So, I think the credits should be winding down since we're seeing clips of Death Egg Robot, so next time we'll move on to episode 2, and its lock-on bonus. So thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for more Sonic the Hedgehog 4.